Oslo, Norway, December 10th, 1964. The auditorium of the University of Oslo held its breath. A man 35 years old walked to the podium to accept the Nobel Peace Prize. He was, at that moment, the youngest person in the history of the award to receive it. The audience rose. The applause came in waves. Outside, the Norwegian winter was absolute and cold, and inside, the light was warm on a face that the entire world had learned to recognize over the preceding decade. The face of a man who had been beaten, jailed, had his home bombed, had stood before the Lincoln Memorial and spoken about a dream, and had not stopped. What the audience in Oslo did not know, what the cameras did not show, was that 3 weeks earlier, a package had arrived at the offices of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in Atlanta, Georgia. It was an anonymous parcel. King was in Oslo. His wife, Coretta Scott King, opened it. Inside was a reel of audio tape and a letter. The letter informed King that he was a fraud, a liar, and a moral abomination. It told him that his private life was about to be exposed to the nation. And then it told him that he had 34 days to kill himself. The sender did not sign the letter, but the sender was not a private citizen, not a racist stranger, not a lone operative acting on private conviction. The sender was the Federal Bureau of Investigation of the United States of America. This is not a story about a rogue agency. This is a story about official policy. The American Constitution is specific about what the government may and may not do to its citizens. The First Amendment guarantees freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. The Fourth Amendment prohibits unreasonable searches and seizures. The Fifth Amendment protects against self-incrimination. These protections are not aspirational language. They are the explicit legal architecture of the most powerful democracy in the world. Martin Luther King had never been convicted of a crime. He had never been charged with a crime that survived legal scrutiny. He was a Baptist minister, a doctoral graduate of Boston University, a civil rights attorney, and a man whose organizational work had led, directly and demonstrably, to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, legislation that the Congress of the United States had passed as a matter of law. He was, by the measure of the Nobel Committee in Stockholm, a figure of global moral significance. So why did the most powerful law enforcement agency in the most powerful democracy in the world spend years systematically wiretapping his phones, bugging his hotel rooms, collecting recordings of his private life, and then assemble those recordings into a package designed to blackmail him into destroying himself? The answer does not live in any ideology of personal hatred, though personal hatred was certainly present. It lives in something colder: calculation. The FBI under J. Edgar Hoover concluded that King was winning, that his method of nonviolent political organizing was producing legislative results that would permanently alter the power structure of American society, and decided that this outcome was unacceptable. Not illegal, not violent, not genuinely communist, simply unacceptable. And the agency built to enforce the law chose to act outside it. To understand what happened, you need to understand J. Edgar Hoover, not as a cartoon villain, but as an institutional phenomenon. Hoover had been director of the FBI since 1935. By 1964, he had held that position for 39 years without meaningful oversight, without a term limit, without any mechanism by which a sitting president could remove him without triggering the release of the files Hoover maintained on everyone who might try. He had outlasted 6 presidents. He had files on members of Congress, senior judges, political allies and enemies alike. Dossiers of real and fabricated personal information assembled specifically to make him untouchable. Every president who considered removing him discovered the same thing. Hoover was more dangerous fired than employed. He remained. COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program, had been operating since 1956, officially aimed at the Communist Party of the United States. By the early 1960s, it had expanded to include labor organizers, anti-war activists, the Socialist Workers' Party, and eventually, virtually every domestic political organization that Hoover considered a threat to the social order he had appointed himself to protect. The Black Panther Party, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, individual citizens. On the 28th of August, 1963, Martin Luther King stood before the Lincoln Memorial and delivered the speech that would define him for history. The crowd numbered more than 200,000. The broadcast audience was tens of millions. The following morning, William C. Sullivan, the head of the FBI's Domestic Intelligence Division and Hoover's most operationally aggressive lieutenant, sat down and wrote a memo to his director. It read, "We must mark him now, if we have not before, as the most dangerous Negro in America to the future of this nation. Not the most violent, not the most criminal, the most dangerous. The distinction is everything." King, much later, reflected on the pressure that surrounded him in those years. "I cannot be worried about what they say about me. If I worried about all of that, I would never accomplish anything." He said it calmly. He had no way of knowing when he said it precisely what all of that would eventually mean. The package mailed to Atlanta in November 1964 was not improvised. It was the product of months of deliberate preparation by a federal agency with effectively unlimited surveillance resources. FBI agents had been installing microphones in King's hotel rooms since late 1963, in Washington, New York, Atlanta, and wherever else his schedule took him. The surveillance was continuous, methodical, and conducted under direct orders from Hoover's office. The recordings captured King's private conversations, his pastoral counseling, his arguments with colleagues, and his personal life. The FBI cataloged everything. Sullivan and his team reviewed the recordings and selected what they considered most damaging. The tape was edited and assembled. The letter was written carefully, deliberately, in a voice designed to impersonate a disappointed Black American speaking to King in the language of his own community. The letter was mailed from a city other than Washington to obscure the origin. It was addressed to King at the SCLC offices. The timing was not accidental. King had just been announced as the Nobel Peace Prize laureate, and the package was designed to arrive before he traveled to Oslo, ideally to derail the acceptance entirely. It arrived on the 21st of November, 1964. King was already in Norway. Coretta Scott King opened it. She described the tape as containing mumbo-jumbo, audio that had been so heavily edited and decontextualized that its content was barely intelligible. The letter, however, was entirely clear. The recovered, unredacted text, found by historian Beverly Gage in the National Archives in 2014 and published by the New York Times on the 13th of November that year, reads, in its most direct passages, "King, look into your heart. You know you are a complete fraud and a great liability to all of us Negroes. You are no clergyman, and you know it. You are a colossal fraud and an evil, vicious one at that." And then, at the close, the instruction, "King, there is only one thing left for you to do. You know what it is. You have just 34 days in which to do it." This exact number has been selected for a practical reason. It has definite practical significance. You are done. There is but one way out for you. You better take it before your filthy, abnormal, fraudulent self is bared to the nation. The 34 days would have brought the deadline to just before the Nobel ceremony in Oslo. The FBI's intent was not ambiguous. The letter did not arrive in isolation. It was one instrument in a campaign that ran for more than 5 years. October 7th, 1963. Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy signed the authorization allowing the FBI to wiretap Martin Luther King's personal telephone. Kennedy signed it on the grounds that 2 of King's advisors were suspected of Communist Party connections, a justification that the Church Committee investigation, 12 years later, would confirm was never substantiated by actual evidence. The man whose family name had become synonymous with American liberal idealism signed the document that put King under permanent surveillance. The institution of American democracy authorized the operation. This is not a peripheral detail, it is the central one. November 1963. FBI agents began installing listening devices in hotel rooms where King stayed across the country. August 28, 1963. I have a dream. August 29th, Sullivan's memo designating King the most dangerous man in America. October 1964. King was notified of the Nobel Prize. Hoover's response, according to internal documents, was to intensify the campaign to discredit him before the ceremony. November 18, 1964. 3 days before the package arrived at the SCLC offices, Hoover held a press conference at FBI headquarters. Responding to King's criticism that FBI agents in the South had failed to protect civil rights workers, Hoover called King, in front of assembled reporters, the most notorious liar in the country. He said it directly, in public, as the sitting director of the FBI. November 21st, 1964. The package arrived in Atlanta. Coretta opened it December 10th, 1964. King accepted the Nobel Prize in Oslo, standing entirely upright, and donated the prize money, $54,000, to the civil rights movement. March 8, 1971. A group calling itself the Citizens Commission to Investigate the FBI broke into the FBI field office in Media, Pennsylvania. They had chosen the date deliberately, the night of the Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazier heavyweight title fight, when they calculated that security personnel would be distracted. They removed over 1,000 documents, reviewed them, and distributed copies to members of Congress and journalists. The documents contained references to a program called COINTELPRO. It was the first time the public heard the word. 1975. Senator Frank Church convened the Senate Select Committee to investigate the intelligence agencies. The Church Committee confirmed under oath and on the record that the suicide letter was produced by the FBI, that Sullivan was the likely author, and that the program targeting King had been authorized at the senior leadership level. April 4, 1968, 6:01 in the evening. King stepped onto the balcony of room 306 at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. A bullet fired from a rooming house across the street struck him. He died at St. Joseph's Hospital 1 hour later. He was 39 years old. FBI surveillance of King had been continuous and uninterrupted until that day. Here is the central question that the FBI's own documents answer, and it is not the question anyone was supposed to ask. Hoover's public justification for the surveillance of King was the communist threat. Two of King's advisors, Stanley Levison and Jack Odell, had past connections to the Communist Party. That was the stated basis for Robert Kennedy's authorization of the wiretaps, and for every subsequent surveillance operation. The implication was that King himself might be a Soviet asset, that the civil rights movement might be a vehicle for foreign subversion. The Church Committee investigation in 1975 found no evidence of this. None. Not a single document, intercepted communication, or informant report that substantiated the claim that King was under communist direction, or that the SCLC was a Soviet-influenced organization. The justification that had authorized years of surveillance, hotel room microphones, and an explicit letter demanding suicide was factually empty. What the FBI's own internal documents did establish was the real reason. Sullivan's memos, read in sequence, describe the threat in terms that have nothing to do with the Soviet Union. They describe a man building a multiracial political coalition capable of winning elections, of changing legislation, of reorganizing the distribution of political power in America at the structural level. They describe, in the language of threat assessment, a movement that was succeeding through entirely legitimate democratic means, marches, speeches, voter registration, legal challenge, and they describe that success as the danger. The apparatus of state security was deployed not to protect democracy from its enemies, but to protect the existing distribution of power from democracy itself. Political scientists have a term for this: the use of criminal law enforcement as a tool of political suppression. When a government prosecutes or intimidates citizens not because they have committed crimes, but because they represent a legitimate political challenge, the institution of law has been converted into its opposite. It has become the mechanism of the thing it was designed to prevent. Hoover understood this perfectly. He built a career on it. Memphis, Tennessee, April 4th, 1968, early evening. King had come to Memphis to support a strike by the city's sanitation workers, black men who had been paid less than white workers for the same labor, who had been excluded from the city's pension system, who had been denied basic workplace safety protections. Their demand was recognition. They wanted the city to acknowledge that their labor had the same value as anyone else's. King, standing on the side of the workers, was doing what he had always done, supporting the precise kind of organized, non-violent, legally grounded political action that the FBI had spent years trying to destroy. He was at the Lorraine Motel because a church in Memphis had offered him a room, and because the Lorraine was a black-owned establishment that civil rights workers used throughout the South. He had just returned from a phone call. He was wearing a white shirt. He was standing on the second-floor balcony outside room 306, speaking to a colleague on the courtyard below about the dinner plans for the evening. The shot came from a bathroom window in Bessie Brewer's boarding house, across Mulberry Street. It hit King in the jaw and severed his spinal cord. Coretta Scott King received the telephone call at home in Atlanta. Their 4 children were home. James Earl Ray was convicted of the murder in 1969 and sentenced to 99 years. He maintained, in the years before his own death in 1998, that he had not acted alone. The King family came to believe the same thing. The question has never been officially answered to their satisfaction. William C. Sullivan, believed to be the man who wrote the letter commanding King to kill himself, died on the 10th of November, 1977, in a hunting accident in New Hampshire. He had been shot by another hunter who, according to that hunter's account, mistook him for a deer. Sullivan was 65 years old. He had been scheduled to testify before a congressional committee investigating intelligence abuses in the weeks following his death. He never testified. The FBI's letter to King raises 3 questions that neither law, nor history, nor any subsequent official inquiry has adequately resolved. The first is authorization. The letter was not the act of one unstable agent. COINTELPRO was a formal, classified program operating under bureau-wide protocols. Sullivan was the head of the Domestic Intelligence Division, the 3rd-ranking official in the FBI. The surveillance of King had been explicitly authorized in writing by the Attorney General of the United States. At the level of the executive branch, Lyndon Johnson received regular intelligence reports on King's activities, reports generated by the very surveillance program that produced the letter. The question of how many people read that letter before it was sealed, addressed, and mailed, and of how many of those people considered stopping it, has never been answered under oath. The Church Committee got close. It did not get to the bottom. The second question concerns accountability. Beverly Gage, the Yale historian who found the unredacted letter in the National Archives in 2014, wrote that the document reminds us of what the government has done in the past and what it may do again. The passive construction is doing significant work in that sentence. What Gage means, precisely, is this: no one was prosecuted for any of it. Hoover died in May 1972, before the Church Committee, before any public reckoning. Sullivan died in a hunting accident weeks before scheduled testimony. The agents who installed the microphones were following orders. The officials who gave the orders claimed constitutional authority. The Attorney General who signed the wiretap authorization later became a senator and a national icon of progressive politics. The mechanisms of criminal accountability that exist in American law to address exactly this kind of institutional abuse were, in every single case, not applied. The third question is the one that cannot be answered through law at all. It concerns what it means to be a citizen of a state that does this to one of its most consequential citizens, while simultaneously telling the world that it is the model of democratic government. King knew what was being done to him. He continued. He went to Oslo. He continued. He went to Memphis. The moral weight of that continuation The decision to persist in the face of a government that had literally sent him a letter demanding his suicide belongs to a register of human conduct that legal and political analysis cannot fully reach. The long-term institutional consequences of COINTELPRO were among the most significant reforms in the history of the American intelligence state, and they remain visibly incomplete. The Church Committee's 1975 investigation produced a wave of structural changes to the FBI that remain in force today. The position of FBI director was given a statutory term limit of 10 years, a direct legislative response to the 48-year tenure of Hoover, which had demonstrated that an unchecked directorship was incompatible with democratic accountability. Congressional oversight of intelligence activities was formalized through permanent select committees. Rules governing domestic surveillance were codified. The FBI was, at least on paper, pulled back from the surveillance of domestic political organizations without specific evidence of criminal conduct. At the cultural level, the King case became the most documented example in American history of state surveillance weaponized against a citizen whose only offense was political effectiveness. In 2020, director Sam Pollard released MLK FBI, a documentary built almost entirely from the declassified files. It received widespread critical recognition and brought the specific content of those files to a new generation of viewers who had grown up after the fact. The film does not editorialize. It presents the documents and allows the scale of the operation to register on its own terms. On the 21st of July, 2025, the United States government, acting under an executive order signed by President Donald Trump directing the release of assassination records related to King, John F. Kennedy, and Robert F. Kennedy, released more than 230,000 pages of FBI files related to King. The release included over 6,000 individual documents. The King family, represented by Martin Luther King III and Bernice King, publicly opposed the release, arguing that it was motivated by political purposes rather than genuine historical transparency, and that it risked exposing personal information about their father without adequate context. The released documents confirmed the scale of the surveillance operation in detail that had not previously been publicly available. They did not, according to the Stanford University King Institute's analysis, provide new clarity on whether a broader conspiracy existed behind the assassination. The hotel room recordings, the tapes sealed by Judge John Lewis Smith Jr. in 1977, placed in the National Archives for 50 years, remain classified. Their release date, as ordered by that court ruling, is 2027. In 2027, a sealed container somewhere in the National Archives in College Park, Maryland, is scheduled to be opened. Inside, according to the public record of what Judge John Lewis Smith Jr. ordered sealed in 1977, are the audio recordings made by FBI surveillance equipment installed in hotel rooms where Martin Luther King slept. They span years. The FBI's own accounting suggests there are hundreds of hours. What is on them has not been confirmed in any official document released to date. The SCLC once filed a motion asking a court to order them destroyed. The court declined. We live in 2026 in a world that the 1964 FBI could only have imagined with envy. Every telephone call generates metadata. Every email is potentially stored. The surveillance architecture that required teams of agents to physically enter hotel rooms and install equipment now operates largely through the software embedded in the devices we carry voluntarily. The PRISM program, revealed by Edward Snowden in 2013, demonstrated that the collection of domestic communication data had been operating at a scale that dwarfed anything Hoover's agents could have managed with a reel-to-reel recorder and a compliant hotel manager. In July 2025, 230,000 pages about King were released. The public read about them for several days, debated them for a week, and then moved on to the next news cycle. The technology changes. The ambition does not. The state never voluntarily forgets how to do this.